The morning sun rose slowly over the city, washing the streets in a pale golden glow. But for Grace, there was nothing golden about it. She sat on the edge of the pavement, her back pressed against a cracked concrete wall, her torn handbag lying beside her. Inside that bag was the one thing she refused to let go of, an old accounting textbook with wrinkled pages and scribbles in the margins. It was all she had left of the life she once dreamed of. She hugged the bag close to her stomach. Her belly was heavy now, swollen with the life inside her. Every step hurt. Every night spent on the hard ground left her back aching. She was tired, so tired, but she didn't give up. She never let go of that book. People passed her as if she were invisible. A man in a suit walked by, adjusting his tie. He didn't even glance at her. A woman with a handbag clutched it tighter as she got closer, as though Grace might suddenly spring up and rob her. A group of teenagers laughed loudly, the sound echoing in her ears. One of them tossed an empty soda can near her feet. Grace's face burned with shame, but she lowered her head and stayed quiet. She had learned that on the streets, sometimes silence was the only shield she had. Now and then, someone would drop a coin or two near her. She would whisper, "Thank you," even if they didn't stop to listen. But coins weren't food. Coins weren't a bed. Coins couldn't erase the nightmares of how she ended up here. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering to herself, one day, I'll rise again." But the voice inside her felt weaker each time she said it. Just then, the sound of an expensive car engine cut through the morning noise. Grace opened her eyes. A sleek black car had stopped not far from where she sat. The doors were tinted, the body polished so well it reflected the sunlight. Her heart skipped. Cars like that didn't stop for people like her. The driver stepped out first, opening the back door. Then, a tall man in a perfectly cut suit emerged. He looked like he belonged to another world, the world Grace once dreamed of. His shoes shone, his wristwatch glittered, and his presence turned heads as people passed by. But what struck her most was not the richness of his clothes. It was his eyes. They weren't cold like the others she had seen. They were kind. He looked at her. Grace panicked and lowered her head, pulling her bag closer. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't want pity. The man walked closer anyway. His shadow fell over her, and his voice came gentle but strong. "Are you hungry?" Grace froze. No one had asked her that in months. People asked her to move, to get out of the way, or simply ignored her. But this man had asked if she was hungry. She looked up, her lips trembling. His face was calm, concerned even. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Finally, she nodded. He gave a small smile and extended his hand. "Come with me." Her first instinct was to refuse. What if it was a trick? What if he was like the others who had hurt her before? She hesitated, clutching her bag tighter. But something in his eyes told her she could trust him. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, steady. He helped her to her feet. Her legs wobbled under her weight, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse. But he supported her gently, nodding to his driver to open the car door. "Please," he said, "you'll be safe." For the first time in months, Grace stepped into a car. Not the kind of bus where people shoved her aside. Not the back of a stranger's truck, but a real car with soft seats and cool air. She clutched her bag tightly on her lap, her heart pounding. The man sat across from her, studying her silently for a moment. Then he spoke. "My name is James." Grace swallowed hard. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. She lowered her gaze again. "Grace," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," James said with a smile. She didn't answer. She didn't know how to. Her mind was racing, filled with questions. Why was he helping her? What did he want? Was this a dream? The car pulled into a tall glass building downtown. Grace's eyes widened. She had seen it before when she wandered the streets. It was one of the tallest buildings in the city, sleek and modern, with people in suits constantly rushing in and out. She never thought she would step foot inside. The driver opened the door for her. James stepped out first, then extended his hand again. Grace hesitated but took it. Her feet touched the marble steps leading into the building, and she felt smaller than ever. People stared as they entered, their eyes curious, some even judging. Grace tugged at her torn dress, embarrassed. Inside, the building smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee. The floors gleamed. Phones rang in the distance, heels clicked against the ground, and voices spoke in quick, confident tones. Grace felt like she had walked into another universe. "Don't worry," James whispered to her as they walked toward the elevator. "You're safe here." The elevator ride felt endless. Grace kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her heart pounding with every second. When the doors opened, she followed James into a wide hallway that led to an office with glass walls and a grand desk. A woman stood at the doorway. She wore a neat pencil skirt and high heels, holding a folder in her hands. Her eyes flickered to Grace, scanning her from head to toe. "Sir," the woman said politely, "the clients are waiting." James nodded. "Thank you, Ada. Please get something for Grace to eat." Ada's eyebrows lifted slightly. She glanced at Grace again but said nothing. Instead, she gave a small nod and walked away. James turned back to Grace. "Sit down. Rest. Food will come soon." Grace lowered herself onto a leather chair. It was so soft compared to the hard pavements she was used to that her eyes almost filled with tears. She placed her bag on her lap, clutching it tightly. James smiled gently before heading to the door. "I'll be back shortly. Make yourself comfortable." Then he was gone. Grace sat in silence, her heart still racing. She looked around the office. The shelves filled with books, the family photos on the desk, the city skyline visible through the wide windows. Felt unreal. But even as she sat there, she could hear voices from the hallway. One of them was James's. He sounded frustrated, his tone sharp. Words floated through the walls. "Client, deadline problem." Grace hugged her accounting book closer. Something deep inside told her this was only the beginning. The office door clicked open, and Ada, James's secretary, walked in carrying a tray. She set it down on the desk without a word, though her eyes flickered again at Grace. Grace felt her cheeks heat up. She was painfully aware of how she must look. Hair tangled, dress faded, shoes worn thin. Ada left quickly, and Grace turned her eyes to the tray. A plate of rice and chicken, a glass of juice. She hadn't seen food like this in months. Her hands shook as she picked up the fork. She whispered a small prayer under her breath, then ate. Each bite felt like life flowing back into her body. She ate quickly, almost too quickly, afraid that someone would snatch it away. The food was warm, soft, and rich in flavor. She didn't realize tears were running down her cheeks until she wiped them with the back of her hand. Meanwhile, in the conference room down the hall, James was not enjoying the same peace. He sat at the head of a long glass table, surrounded by his team of top accountants. They had been wrestling with the client's accounts for weeks, but the gaps and errors refused to balance. The client had given them one last chance. If they failed, the firm would lose its biggest contract. James rubbed his forehead. "We've been over this again and again. Where's the leak? Where are the missing numbers?" One of the senior accountants adjusted his glasses. "We've traced every transaction, sir, but nothing adds up." "Then we're missing something," James snapped, his voice sharper than he intended. He sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. His patience was thinning. Grace, sitting alone in his office, could hear his voice faintly through the walls. She froze mid-bite, straining her ears. His tone carried frustration, urgency. The words reached her like echoes. "Client, mistake. Deadline." Her heart thudded. She knew those words. She understood that tone. It was the language of numbers, of balance sheets and ledgers, the world she once lived in. She glanced at her bag. Slowly, she pulled out her textbook. The cover was faded, the corners torn, but inside it still held the world of equations, examples, and solutions. She flipped through the pages with shaky fingers, her mind already racing. She hesitated. Should she stay seated? Should she dare to get up? What if she embarrassed herself? What if they threw her out? But another voice inside her whispered, "What if this is your chance?" Before she could stop herself, she stood. Her legs trembled, but she tightened her grip on her bag and walked toward the sound of the voices. In the conference room, the air was thick with tension. Papers were scattered across the table, calculators clicking, pens scribbling. James looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his jaw clenched. Then the door opened. Every head turned. There she was, the homeless girl James had brought in. The one who had been sitting quietly in his office. The room fell silent. Grace stepped in slowly, holding her bag tight. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely carrying. I think I know where the mistake is." A murmur ran around the table. One of the accountants frowned. Another chuckled under his breath. The head of security, standing near the corner, straightened. "Miss," he said firmly, "you can't be in here." He started toward her, but James lifted his hand. "Wait." His eyes stayed on Grace. "Let her speak." The room went even quieter. The security guard stopped, hesitating. The accountants exchanged doubtful looks. Grace's knees felt weak, but she pushed forward. She looked at the whiteboard filled with messy calculations. In seconds, her eyes danced across the numbers. She saw it, the gaps, the repeated entries, the simple oversight that had been buried under complicated analysis. Her heart pounded. She grabbed a marker from the table and, with shaking hands, began writing on the board. "Here," she said, circling a section. "This is where the figures don't balance." Someone duplicated an entry, which threw off the entire sheet. "If you adjust this," she erased a figure, rewrote it, then continued, "the balance aligns again. Then the rest falls into place." Her hands moved faster, the fear melting into focus. Numbers flowed from her like second nature. Within minutes, the once chaotic board was neat, balanced, complete. She stepped back, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "That's it," she whispered. The room was silent for a moment. Then gasps. One of the accountants leaned forward, eyes wide. She's right." Another double-checked the figures with his calculator. His face lit up. "She's absolutely right. It balances perfectly now." All eyes turned to Grace. She lowered her gaze, hugging her bag tightly, expecting ridicule or dismissal. Instead, the sound of clapping filled the room. One by one, the accountants applauded. Even the sternest faces softened into amazement. James stood slowly, his eyes fixed on her. A smile spread across his face, the first real smile of the day. "Remarkable," he said quietly. Grace's lips trembled. No one had ever looked at her like that in months. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with respect. Back in his office, James closed the door behind them. Grace sat nervously, her bag clutched in her lap. He turned, his voice soft but steady. "Grace, how did you do that?" She blinked. "Do what?" "Balance those numbers. You didn't hesitate for a second. My best team has been on that case for months, and you walked in and solved it in minutes." "How?" Grace's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Her voice was low. "I studied accounting once. I was the best in my class." James tilted his head slightly. "Once." That single word hit her like a blade. She lowered her gaze, staring at the floor. The memories she had tried so hard to bury clawed their way back to the surface. Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "I was in my final year at the university," she began. "Numbers were my whole world. While others dreaded lectures, I loved them. I could spend hours solving problems. Professors praised me. My classmates came to me for help. I thought my future was set." Her voice cracked, but she went on. "One night I stayed late in the library. I had a test coming up and I wanted to revise. When I left, the streets were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't see them coming until it was too late." Her hands shook. She wrapped her arms around herself as if to keep from falling apart. "They dragged me into a corner. They didn't care how much I screamed." Her voice broke. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "When it was over, I couldn't even recognize myself." James's jaw clenched. his fists curled at his sides. Rage burned in his chest, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. I told myself I could still finish school, that I could survive. But weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. Everything crumbled. Couldn't hide it. When my parents found out, she swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. They said I had brought shame to the family. They threw me out. The tears fell freely now. Grace pressed a hand over her face, but her voice pushed through the sobs. I begged them. I begged for mercy. I told them it wasn't my fault. But they didn't listen. They told me I was ruined, that no man would ever want me, that I didn't belong in their house anymore. She dropped her hand and looked up at James. Her eyes were red, swollen, raw with pain. Since then, I've been on the streets, alone, pregnant, hungry. Every day is a fight to stay alive. But I couldn't let go of this. She lifted her handbag and pulled out the battered accounting book. She hugged it like a child. It's the only piece of my old life I still have. When I read it, I feel like maybe I still matter. James's heart twisted. He had seen many people chase wealth, power, and recognition, but he had never seen someone cling so tightly to hope in the middle of despair. He walked slowly toward her. "Grace," he said softly, "you went through all that, and still you didn't give up?" She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I almost did, so many times. Some nights, I prayed I wouldn't wake up in the morning. But then I'd touch my stomach, and I'd remember the baby. She didn't ask for this. She doesn't deserve to be punished for what happened to me. So I kept fighting. For her." James felt his chest tighten. He looked at her, not as the homeless woman he had found on the roadside, but as a warrior who had survived hell itself. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself until his eyes met hers. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." Grace shook her head quickly. "No, I'm broken. I'm nothing." "Don't say that," James said firmly. His voice carried the authority of a man who was used to being listened to, but also the gentleness of someone who truly cared. "You are not nothing. You're brilliant. You're brave. You've survived things that would have destroyed others. And today you saved my company." Grace stared at him, her tears slowing. James smiled faintly. "From today, you won't suffer on the streets anymore. You'll work with me here in this firm. I'll make sure you have a home, food, everything you need to live with dignity. You'll deliver your baby safely. You'll raise her in a warm house, not on the cold ground." Her mouth opened slightly. She blinked, as though trying to wake from a dream. You do that? For me?" "Yes." James's eyes didn't waver. "Not because I pity you, because you deserve it. Because I see who you are, and I know you're worth it." Grace's chest shook as a sob escaped her. She covered her mouth with both hands. For months, she had begged strangers for coins, prayed for a miracle, wished for someone, anyone, to see her as more than trash. And now, in this office high above the city, a billionaire CEO was telling her she mattered. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. James reached out, gently taking her trembling hands away from her face. "Say yes. Say you'll take this chance." Her lips trembled. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes." James smiled and squeezed her hands. "Then it's settled. You're no longer a beggar on the street. You're part of this firm now." Grace broke down in tears again, but this time they were different. They were tears of relief, of hope, of rebirth. She clutched her accounting book tightly, pressing it to her heart. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe. James drove slowly through a quiet neighborhood lined with small trees and neat lawns. Grace sat beside him, hands pressed to her belly, eyes wide with nerves and hope. At the end of the street, a cream-painted bungalow sat behind a short black gate. A real estate agent stood waiting on the front step with a tablet in her hand and a bright smile on her face. James parked and came around to open Grace's door. "Ready?" he asked softly. Grace nodded, though her legs felt weak. They walked up the path together. The agent shook James's hand, then turned to Grace. "Welcome," the agent said. "We've been expecting you." She unlocked the door and pushed it open. Grace stepped inside and stopped. The living room was fully furnished. Soft sofa, clean rug, small bookshelf, curtains that let in warm light. A dining table sat by the window with 2 chairs. The air smelled of new paint and lemon cleaner. A framed print on the wall read, "Home is where you are safe." James picked up a set of keys from the console table and pressed them into Grace's palm. "This is your new home." Grace looked from the keys to his face, then back to the room. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears filled her eyes. "My home," she whispered. "Your home," James said. "No rent, no worries. Just rest, work, and get ready for the baby." Her shoulders shook. The tears came hard now, months of fear melting into relief. She laughed and cried at the same time, and James handed her a tissue from his pocket. "Take your time," he said, smiling. They walked through the house together. The kitchen had clean plates, pots, and a full fridge. The bedroom held a neat bed with new sheets. In the second room, there was a small empty space with a rolled-up rug. The agent spoke up. "We can set this up as a nursery when you're ready. Just tell us what you want." Grace ran a finger along the window frame. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking. "Thank you so much." They stepped outside again to sign the final papers. Just then, a white sedan pulled up. A man in a crisp shirt stepped out, waved, and rolled the car forward. "Car dealer," James said, eyes twinkling. "Right on time." The dealer opened the passenger door and showed the clean seats, the simple dashboard, and the keys dangling from a tag. "All serviced, full tank," he said. James turned to Grace. "This is for you to commute to work and anywhere else you want. You shouldn't be on public transport in your condition." Grace pressed her hand to her chest. "A car? For me?" "For you," James said. "Safe and simple to drive." She took the keys with both hands like they were made of gold. "Thank you," she whispered, then said it again, louder, looking him in the eye. "Thank you." The dealer gave her a short walkthrough. Seat adjustment, mirrors, the start button, the wipers and lights. Grace nodded carefully, soaking it in. She sat behind the wheel for a moment and closed her eyes. She had slept under bridges. She had stood in the rain with a cold stomach. Now she was in her own car in front of her own house. Her throat tightened and she wiped her eyes again. James leaned on the doorframe. "You'll do great." She looked up at him and smiled through tears. "I will." That evening, after the agent and dealer left, James carried in 2 boxes, groceries and a few baby things. "Startups for the week," he joked, placing them on the kitchen counter. Grace put the food away in small, careful movements. She kept glancing around the room, as if the house might vanish if she blinked too long. James showed her a folder on the table. "Numbers to call if you need repairs. And mine at the top," he said. "Anytime, day or night." "James," she said quietly, "I don't know how to repay you." "You already did," he replied. "You saved my firm." They stood there for a few seconds, the silence soft and warm. Then James cleared his throat. "Big day tomorrow. First day as an employee. Get some rest." Grace nodded, walked him to the door, and thanked him again. When he left, she locked the door and leaned her back against it, breathing out. She walked from room to room. Kitchen, living room, bedroom. Touching the walls, the curtains, the bedspread, as if learning a new language with her hands. She showered, ate a simple dinner, and sat with her old accounting book on her lap. The pages were worn, but her eyes were bright. Before bed she whispered, "Thank you, God," and placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked once, and Grace smiled into the dark. The morning came with soft light through the curtains and the sound of birds outside. Grace dressed in a clean, simple dress and tied her hair back. She checked herself in the mirror and nodded. "We're ready," she told the baby. She locked the house, slid into the driver's seat, and started the car. Purred to life. As she drove out of the neighborhood, her heart thumped with a mix of fear and joy. The city roads felt different today. They didn't swallow her. They carried her. At the firm, the glass doors opened and cool air wrapped around her. People looked up. Whispers moved like a small wind through the lobby. That's her. The mystery accountant. The one who solved the big case. Grace kept her eyes forward and walked to the front desk. Ada, James's secretary, was already there, neat as always, a tablet in her hand. "Good morning, Grace," Ada said with a calm smile. "HR has your papers ready. This way." "Thank you," Grace replied. They took the elevator to the 6th floor. In a small room, Grace signed her forms, received an ID card, and got a laptop bag. A junior HR officer pointed to the printer room, the kitchen, and the ladies' room. "If you need anything, ask me," she said kindly. James appeared beside the glass wall of the open office floor. "Team," he called, and heads lifted over cubicle walls. "This is Grace. She joins us today." There were nods, a few smiles, and a murmur of welcome. A tall man at the back didn't clap. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Francis." James led Grace to a simple desk near the windows. "Your space," he said, "and your first task is in your inbox. A client report with strange numbers on inventory." Grace sat, opened the laptop, and logged in. The screen glowed blue, then the emails loaded. She pulled the file, printed the report, and spread the pages in a neat line. Her old textbook sat at the corner of her desk like an anchor. She read slowly at first, then faster. Numbers fell into place in her mind the way stars make shapes if you stare long enough. There it was, a repeated item count hiding inside a messy summary tab. She circled 3 lines, made a small table to the side, then typed a short note with the fix and the clear total. She carried the file to James's office. He was in a quick stand-up meeting with 2 managers. She waited by the door. When he saw her, he waved her in. "I think the error is here," Grace said, handing over her notes. "The item count was rolled up twice. If we adjust this range, the cost of goods sold corrects itself. Then the cash flow matches the ledger." The 2 managers leaned in. One blinked. "How did we miss that?" James smiled. "Because we were overthinking." He looked up at Grace. "Fast and clean. Good work." Word moved fast. By lunch, people from other teams were peeking at her desk. A junior analyst asked shyly, "Can you show me how you did that?" Grace smiled and walked her through the steps. Her voice was calm. Her hands were steady. She didn't show off. She just explained. In the break room, 2 senior staff whispered as she poured water. "Is she really that good?" one asked. "She is," the other said, sounding surprised. "And she's quiet about it." Not everyone was smiling. Francis stood a few desks away, watching. He had been James's right hand for years. He knew where every file was, which client was a headache, how to calm a room. Now people were walking past him to ask Grace for help. He saw the way James leaned forward when she spoke, the way he nodded as if he had found a voice he trusted. Around 4 o'clock, Francis walked to Grace's desk. He stopped and looked down at the old textbook. His mouth twitched. "Settled in?" he asked. Grace looked up. "I think so. Thank you." He nodded at her screen. "You've made a lot of changes for your first day." "I only corrected what was there," she said. "I'll keep my notes clear." His smile was thin. "Good. Clarity is important. So is respect for the chain of command." Grace held his gaze. "I understand." He leaned a little closer, voice softer. "People here worked hard to get where they are. Years of late nights. You are new. Move slowly." She felt the warning in his tone. "I'm here to work," she said gently. "That's all." Francis straightened. "We'll see," he said and walked away. Her heart beat faster. She rested a hand on her belly. "We're okay," she whispered to her baby. "We'll just do the work." At 5:30, the office began to thin out. James passed by her desk, hands in his pockets. "How was day 1? "Good," she said. "Busy. I learned a lot." He glanced at the neat stack of files. "You did more than learn." He lowered his voice. "Don't rush home if you're scared to drive in traffic. I can send a driver today." Grace shook her head with a small smile. "I can try. If I get stuck, I'll park and call." "Deal," he said. He started to walk on, then stopped. "And Grace." She looked up. "I'm proud of you." The words warmed her more than the office lights. "Thank you." When he left, she packed slowly. Laptop, notes, ID card on a lanyard. She slid the old textbook into her bag last, as always. As she stood, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Great start today. Jay." She smiled and typed back, "Thank you. I'll keep doing my best." Another message arrived, from a different unknown number. "Move slowly. Not everyone here is your fan. F." Grace stared at the screen for a long second, then locked the phone and slipped it into her bag. Outside, the sky was pink and soft. She walked to her car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel. Before she started the engine, she took a deep breath and spoke out loud, voice steady. "I have a home," she said. "I have a job. I have a baby. And I have work to do." She started the car and joined the flow of evening traffic. Calm hands, clear eyes, and a new life beginning to take shape. The days that followed were quiet and warm. James and Grace fell into a sweet rhythm without trying. In the morning, James stopped by her desk with a soft "good morning." He always noticed the small things. If she looked tired, he'd slide a bottle of water toward her. If she was frowning at a file, he'd ask, "Want a second pair of eyes?" At lunch, they sometimes shared food in the rooftop garden. They talked about simple things. Music they liked, the best way to make jollof, funny stories from school. Nothing big, just enough to make the day feel lighter. Grace felt safe. She worked hard, kept her notes neat, and sent clean summaries on time. People started asking for her help. Most were kind. A few were quiet. One person watched too closely, Francis. He didn't like how James now asked, "What does Grace think?" He didn't like the way people smiled at her when she walked by. One afternoon, when the office was a little empty and the printer room was humming, Francis stepped in and closed the door behind him. Grace was there, picking up a stack of pages. She looked up, surprised. "Hi," she said, trying to be polite. Francis didn't smile. "You've made quite a splash," he said. "I'm just doing my job," Grace replied, calm but alert. He took a step closer. "You've been here 5 minutes and people act like you built the firm. Be careful. Respect matters. So does the order of things." Grace held his gaze. "I respect everyone. I'm not here to take anything from anyone." He gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "You already have. James used to bring me his toughest problems. Now he brings them to you." He leaned in slightly. "Don't let the attention confuse you. It doesn't last." Grace's hands tightened on the paper, but her voice stayed steady. "If there's a problem with my work, tell me. If not, please let me pass." For a second, Francis said nothing. Then he stepped aside and opened the door. "Just remember what I said," he muttered, and walked out. Grace stood still, breathing slowly until her heart calmed. She pressed a hand to her belly. "We're okay," she whispered to the baby. "We're okay." Then she carried the files back to her desk and finished her tasks like she always did, carefully, quietly. Well, that evening James drove her to the small park near her house. The sun was low and soft. For a while they didn't talk. They just watched. James turned to her. "You're quiet." Grace looked at her hands. "I had a moment with Francis today." He waited. He didn't rush her. "In the printer room," she said. She told him everything. How Francis closed the door, how his words pressed in on her, how it made her feel small but how she stood anyway. She kept it plain. No extra spice. Just what happened. James listened, shoulders tight, mouth set. When she finished, he let out a breath like he was putting down something heavy. "I'm sorry," he said. "That shouldn't have happened." Grace looked at him. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You didn't," he said. "He did." He stared at the grass for a moment, choosing his next words. "I'll speak to him, and I'll set clear lines. You won't be alone in this." "Will it get messy?" "Maybe," he said. He lifted his eyes to hers. "But if it does, I'll stand in front of the mess." The words settled over her like shade on a hot day. She felt the tightness in her chest loosen a little. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat again in quiet, listening to the wind move through the leaves. Somewhere behind them a baby cooed. A bicycle bell rang. Grace and James both smiled without looking at each other, like the sound was a small shared secret. James rubbed his palms on his knees like he was nervous. "Grace," he said, voice soft, "there's something I need you to know." She felt the air change. She turned to him fully. "I care about you," he said. No rush, no heavy speech, just the truth in simple words. "Not because of the work, not because of the noise around you, because you're you." Her eyes burned. She swallowed. "I know your life has been hard," he went on. "I know you're carrying a lot. I don't mind. I don't want easy. I want true. And you are the truest person I know." Grace looked down. A tear fell to her knuckle. "James," she whispered, "I'm pregnant. People will talk. I don't have much. I don't know how to be anything other than trying." He smiled, small and warm. "Trying is everything." He took a breath. "I want to be with you. I want to be here for the baby too. If you'll let me." She didn't answer right away. The wind softened. Cloud shifted. The light on his face changed. She saw the care in his eyes. She felt the baby move, one gentle push, like a nudge toward yes. She made a tiny sound that was almost a laugh. "You always show up at the right moment," she said. "And you always stand even when it's hard," he replied. They both leaned in at the same time. Not far, not fast, just enough for the world to get quiet. He paused a breath away, asking without words. She closed the last inch, giving the answer. The kiss was slow and sure, warm, safe. It felt like a door opening to a room she didn't know she had inside her. Light, wide, and kind. When they pulled away, they stayed close, foreheads almost touching. Grace wiped a tear with the back of her hand and let out a shaky laugh. "James, are you sure?" she asked, voice small but clear. "Are you sure you want to be with a poor nobody like me?" He shook his head, eyes steady on hers. "You're not a nobody. You are Grace. You are brave. You are good. You are the smartest person I know. And I don't care that you're pregnant. I don't care what people say. I just want to be with you." Something inside her unclenched, like a fist finally opening. She breathed in. It didn't hurt. "Okay," she whispered. Then stronger, "Okay." She kissed him back. Deeper this time, still gentle, full of yes. The timing was right. The place was right. She felt chosen, not rescued. Seen, not judged. A little kick tapped under her palm. James rested his hand there too, and they both laughed against each other's lips. "She agrees," he said. "Or she wants roasted corn," Grace said, smiling through tears. They stood and walked to the gate hand in hand, bought 2 cobs, and ate them on the way back to the car. Butter on fingers, joy in their eyes. Nothing fancy, just real. At the car door, James squeezed her hand. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." "Together," she said back. Behind them, the park settled into evening. Ahead of them, the road waited. And somewhere between the two, a new thing had started, simple, honest, and strong enough to grow. The days after the park felt light for Grace and James. They worked side by side, laughed when they could, and faced hard tasks without fear. But in the quiet corners of the office, Francis watched. He saw James copy Grace on big emails. He saw clients ask for her by name. He saw the way James smiled when she walked into a room. Each small thing was like a stone in his chest. Heavy, cold. He told himself it wasn't jealousy. He told himself it was about respect and order. But the truth was harder. He felt replaced. At work, in James's life, in the story of the firm he once helped build. One Tuesday night, long after most people had gone home, Francis sat at his desk with the lights dim and the office almost silent. The city shone through the glass walls. He opened the shared drive where the team stored client files and searched for Grace's folder. He found it clean, neatly named, each version labeled by date. He opened the latest spreadsheet. It was tight, balanced, simple to read. Even he had to admit it. She was good. He stared at the screen, fingers still. Then he began to type. Started small. He changed a sign on a formula, turning a plus into a minus. He hid a row that held an adjustment. He pasted a value over a formula so the number would not move when new data came in. To anyone rushing, it would look normal. To a client who checked line by line, it would look like Grace made mistakes. He saved the file, kept the same name, and closed it. His heart was beating too fast. He stood, walked to the window, and watched his reflection. He told himself he was taking back what was his. He told himself he was fixing a wrong. But when he left the office, the lie did not settle. It followed him out into the night. The next morning was busy from the start. Grace came in early, as she always did. She sat at her desk, set her old accounting book on the corner, and opened the day's files. The big client needed a final check before a noon call. She walked through her notes, line by line. Everything looked clean. At 10, a message popped up from the client's team. This tab doesn't match the balance we have. Please confirm. Grace frowned. That didn't make sense. She opened the tab they mentioned. Her stomach dropped. The number in the summary cell was wrong. Not by a little, by enough to look careless. She breathed in, breathed out. She checked the source range. A formula was broken. A row was hidden. A value had been pasted over a live cell. She hadn't done that. Grace stood and walked straight to James's office. He looked up at once when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. "The client flagged a number," she said, stood and walked straight to James's office. He looked up at once when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. "The client flagged a number," she said, keeping her voice calm. "The file on the drive is not the one I left last night. Some formulas are broken. A row is hidden. A value was pasted. I didn't do it." James's mouth hardened. "Show me." They pulled the file on the big screen. James checked the formula trail, the version history, the audit log. His jaw set. "This was changed at 9:47 p.m. last night," he said. He clicked another box. From a desktop on floor 6. He clicked again. The name appeared. Francis. A cold, quiet anger moved through James. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw blame at the air. He picked up the phone. "Ada, bring Francis to my office," he said. "Now. And please tell IT to lock the shared drive at this version until I say otherwise." "On it," Ada said. Grace stood beside him, hands on her belly, eyes on the screen. She kept telling herself to breathe slow. The baby moved once, as if to remind her she was not alone. A minute later, Ada opened the door. Francis walked in with a face that looked bored on purpose. "You wanted to see me?" he said. James pointed at the screen. "Did you edit this file last night?" Francis glanced at it. "I checked it." "Did you edit it?" James asked again. A pause. "I made small changes," Francis said. "Clean up. Nothing major." "You broke live formulas," James said. "You hit a row that changed the total. You pasted numbers over cells that should move. Then you saved over the master copy under Grace's folder." Francis's mask slipped for a second. Then he set his jaw. If her work was solid, a few small changes wouldn't matter. James stood. He was not a loud man. He did not need to be. When he was sure, his voice turned sharp and clear, the kind that makes a room stop. "You crossed a line," he said. "This is not a fight about who gets credit. This is trust. This is the firm's name. You tried to make her look careless in front of a client. You risked our relationship for a cheap hit." Francis's eyes darkened. "You replaced me," he snapped. "You gave her what used to be mine. You think I'm going to stand here and watch you hand my years to a street girl you found outside?" The words hit the air like a slap. Ada flinched in the doorway. Grace did not move, but her eyes changed. She did not look crushed. She looked clear. James took one step closer. "Watch your mouth," he said softly. "And listen to me. You were my right hand for years because I trusted you, not because I owed you. Trust is not a birthright. You broke it. Because of her," Francis hissed. "Because of your choice," James said. This meeting is over. He turned to Ada. Please call security. Francis's face went hot. You'll regret this, he said, voice shaking with anger. I swear you will. James didn't blink. Leave your badge on Ada's desk. For a moment it looked like Francis might say more. Then he pulled the lanyard from his neck, slammed it onto the table, and walked out. His footsteps were hard against the glass floor. The office fell quiet around him, whispers rising like a low wind as he passed. When the door closed, Grace let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. James turned to her at once. His voice softened. Are you okay? I am now, she said. Her hands were still shaking a little. The client. We'll send the clean file with a note, he said. From me. And IT will lock your folder. Nobody edits your work but you and the people you choose. I should have done that sooner. It's not your fault, Grace said. James shook his head. He came at you because of me. That makes it mine to fix. Ada stepped forward with a small nod. I'll handle the notices, she said. And I'll sit with IT until the lock is in place. She looked at Grace. You did nothing wrong. Thank you, Grace said. When Ada left, James reached for Grace's hand and squeezed it once. You stood strong, he said quietly. I'm proud of you. Grace tried to smile, but her eyes were wet. It scared me, she admitted. Not the numbers, the intent. I know, James said. It scared me too. Not for the firm. For you. She nodded. Let's finish the work, she said, wiping her eyes. Let the work speak. They sent the corrected file with a clear summary and a simple note. The client replied within the hour. Thanks for the quick fix. Call still on for noon. The tension in Grace's shoulders dropped an inch. By late afternoon, the team knew Francis was gone. Some were shocked. Some were not. Most went back to work. That is the way of offices. Storms pass, but the day keeps moving. Night fell, and with it came a new kind of quiet. James drove home, but he didn't turn on the music. He kept seeing Francis's eyes when he said, You'll regret this. He knew the man well. Francis did not make empty threats. He walked through his mansion, checked the gates twice, and told the head guard to add another patrol. He sent Ada a final text. Any word? She replied, Badge disabled. Accounts closed. IT will watch the logs all night. James thanked her, then scrolled to Grace's name. He typed, Home? Yes, she replied. Safe. Baby kicking. I'm okay. He stared at the screen a moment longer, then called. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, she said. Hey, he answered. I know it's late. I just needed to hear your voice. I'm here, she said soft. We're fine. I locked the doors. The porch light is on. I can see the yellow wall in the nursery from my bed. It makes me feel calm. He breathed out. Good. There was a quiet pause that felt like a hug. James, she said. You did the right thing. I know, he said. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. Me too, she said. But we'll be okay. We have truth on our side. He smiled at the simple power of that. Sleep, he said. Text me if you need anything. I mean it. I will. Good night. Good night. He ended the call but did not sleep at once. He stood by his bedroom window and looked out over the dark lawn, the curve of the driveway, the gate light glowing at the edge. He thought of Francis's face. He thought of Grace's shaking hands in his office, and how steady her voice had been anyway. He thought of the baby, small and strong, kicking at the right moments like a drum. He made a list in his head. More security at the firm. Limits on who could touch client files. Cameras on the 6th floor. A quiet word with the police inspector he knew, just in case. James's phone rang just after dawn. He answered half asleep, then fully woke at the voice. Sir, this is City General. Grace is here. She's in labor. I'm on my way, he said, already pulling on a shirt. The streets were pale with mourning as he drove. He kept both hands tight on the wheel and told himself to stay calm. Be steady for her. At the hospital desk, a nurse checked her chart and pointed down the hall. Labor room 2. Are you her person? Yes, he said. I am. Grace lay on the bed, hair pulled back, face damp with sweat. A contraction rose and her hands gripped the rails. She turned and saw him. Relief softened her eyes. James. I'm here, he said, taking her hand. I'm not going anywhere. The doctor checked the monitor. Baby's heartbeat is strong. Breathe with me. When I say push, you push. Time stretched and folded. James learned the rhythm, the build, the peak, the fall. He wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, counted her breaths in a low, steady voice, and slipped a straw to her lips for small sips of water. You're strong, he whispered. You're safe. I'm here. Once, between waves, she whispered, I'm scared. I know, he said, but you're doing it. Every breath, you're doing it. Okay, Grace, the doctor said at last, voice sharp with focus. It's time. Next contraction. Give me all you have. The room changed. Nurses moved to their places. The air felt tight, like it was holding its breath. The wave rose. Grace bore down. James counted, steady and slow. 1, 2, 3. Keep going for 5. Rest. Breathe. Again. You're close, the doctor said. I can see the head. Beautiful work. Grace shook with effort. Sweat slid down her temple. James kissed her knuckles. Almost there, he whispered. Almost. She pushed again with a sound that came from deep inside. A sound of strength, fear, and hope all at once. A sharp, bright cry filled the room. The doctor lifted a small, pink bundle. A nurse wrapped the baby and placed her under the warm light. Tiny fists, a wrinkled forehead, a mouth opening and closing like a little bird. Congratulations, the doctor said, smiling. It's a girl. James's chest flooded with joy he didn't know words for. Would you like to cut the cord, sir? A nurse asked. He nodded, hands shaking just a little, and did it carefully. Then they placed the baby in his arms. She was warm and light and perfect. She's perfect, he whispered. He carried her to Grace. The baby quieted the second Grace's fingers touched her cheek, as if she knew the voice that had carried her this far. Tears rolled freely down Grace's face. Hi, she whispered. Hi, my love. James kissed Grace's forehead. His voice was firm and gentle. From now on, you and this baby are my family. Grace looked up at him through tears. Are you sure? I'm sure, he said. I choose you. I choose her. Today and every day. The nurse settled the baby on Grace's chest for skin to skin. The tiny girl rooted, found what she needed, and relaxed. The room grew quiet, just the soft beeps and the baby's small breaths. James pulled his chair close and fixed Grace's pillow. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and let his hand rest there a moment. Thank you, Grace whispered. For what? For staying. What will we call her? James asked after a while. Grace smiled without looking up. We had a list, but right now Joy feels right. James tried the name softly. Joy. He smiled. Welcome, Joy. He sent Ada a short text. She's here. A girl. Healthy. Grace is okay. Hearts came back at once. He turned the phone face down and stayed present. Signing a form, pouring water, adjusting the blanket around Joy's tiny feet. Morning brightened outside, but inside the small room time moved slow and kind. Grace dozed, Joy slept, and James watched over them. A quiet promise steady in his chest. Whatever comes next, I will keep them safe. I will keep them loved. For now, that was enough. A few days after Joy was born, Francis heard the news. Francis saw the news on a gossip page. James outside a hospital, smiling so wide it almost looked like a mistake. Baby Joy, the caption read. Mother and child doing well. Francis stared at the screen until his own face looked strange in the glass. He set the phone down hard. His small flat was hot and still. Paint peeled from the wall above a thin mattress. A single chair sat by a dusty window. He paced back and forth, boards creaking under his feet. You think you can have it all, he muttered. You came from nowhere and you took my place. You took my life. The words rolled through him, heavy and dark. Each day the anger grew. It turned into a picture in his head: Grace's house. A small window, a sleeping baby. He pushed that picture away, then pulled it back again and again until the wrong thing started to feel like the only thing. It happened on a night that looked safe. The sky was clear. The street was quiet. Grace fed Joy, laid her in the crib, and checked the baby monitor. She smiled at the tiny rise and fall. She touched Joy's cheek with the back of her finger. "Good night, my love," she whispered. She locked the doors. She pulled the curtains. She turned on the porch light. She did not think about the small kitchen window where the latch was old. Around 2 in the morning, Francis slipped down the lane in soft shoes and a dark cap. He had watched the house for days. He knew the guard at the corner took tea at this hour. He knew the neighbor's dog slept until dawn. He used the chair under the kitchen window to reach the latch. It gave with a tired click. He climbed in, stood in the dark, and listened. The house breathed like a person asleep. He moved down the hall and found the yellow room. Joy lay warm and small in the crib. For a second, doubt touched his face. Then anger pushed it away. He wrapped her in a blanket. She stirred, made a small sound, and settled. He turned the baby monitor camera so it still showed a shape in the crib. He lifted Joy and held her under his jacket. He left the way he came, lowering himself to the chair, stepping to the ground, and lowering the window until it almost closed. He crossed the lane and vanished into the night. Grace woke at dawn with a smile on her face. She stood, stretched, and went to the nursery. "Good morning, Joy." The rest of the words died. The crib was full of blanket and air. Not a baby, not a breath, just space. She froze. Then she moved fast, pulling the blanket, checking under the crib, behind the chair, inside the basket. Places that made no sense, but panic does not ask for sense. She ran to the front door, locked. She ran to the back, locked. She ran to the kitchen and saw the small window. It looked closed. It wasn't. The latch gave when she touched it. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone. She called James. He picked up on the first ring. "Grace, my baby," she cried. "James, my baby is gone." A sharp silence. Then his voice turned hard and clear. "I'm calling the police. I'm coming now. Lock the front door. Don't touch anything else. I'm on my way." Grace slid to the floor and pressed her palms to her face. She rocked without meaning to. "Please, God, please." James called the police and drove like the road belonged to him. He prayed out loud as he went. "Please keep Joy safe. Please guide us. Please bring her back." He reached the house and found Grace in the living room, shaking. He wrapped her in his arms. "It's not your fault," he said again and again. "This is not your fault." Police cars lined the street within minutes. The inspector in charge, Adebayo, had calm eyes and a steady voice. He took notes in short lines. Officers dusted the window and checked the baby monitor feed. A tech team pulled camera footage from the corner shop and the lane. "Do you have enemies?" the inspector asked James. "Anyone angry enough to do this?" "Francis," James said at once. He hated saying the name. He was fired. He made threats. The inspector nodded. "We'll start there." He moved to the table where a laptop showed street cameras. The screen flicked through the night. Empty lane, a stray cat, a shadow moving along the wall. The shadow turned for half a second. The light caught a sharp cheekbone and a tight jaw. "That's him," James said, his hand hard on the chair. "Francis, get me his current address," the inspector told his team, "and call our unit in that area. Now." They found it. A low-rent building in a part of town people avoided unless they had to go there. Peeling paint. Rust on the railings. A stairwell with a broken light. "Stay here," the inspector told James and Grace. Then he looked at Grace's face. Drawn, wet, brave, and changed his mind. "You can come, but you must stay behind the tape. Do not enter until I say. Promise me." James nodded. "We promise." The convoy moved fast but quiet. No sirens. Just the thrum of engines and the sharp focus of a team with one goal. They reached the building in minutes. The morning light made the walls look tired. Officers spread out, 1 at the back, 2 at the side, 3 at the front door. James and Grace stood behind the police tape with a young officer and Ada, who had arrived by taxi and could not bear to wait at home. Grace clutched Joy's small toy to her chest. She could not stop shaking. James took her free hand. "Breathe with me," he said. "In out, in out." The inspector raised his hand. "Now." They went in fast. Up the dim stairs, past a broken window, down a damp-smelling hall. They stopped at a door with a rusted number. The inspector knocked once. "Police," he called. "Open the door." Silence. He nodded to the team. A metal bar rose, fell, and the lock gave with a crack. They rushed in. James and Grace could not see inside, but they heard it. The short commands, the shuffle of feet, a chair scraping the floor. Then a small, fierce cry cut through everything. It was the most beautiful sound Grace had ever heard. "Joy!" she whispered, and her knees almost gave. An officer appeared in the doorway with a bundle wrapped in a dull gray blanket. Behind him, 2 officers walked out with Francis in handcuffs. His cap was gone. His hair was messy. His eyes stayed on the ground. James and Grace watched from behind the tape as if the world had narrowed to a single line. The officer with the baby walking toward them. The man who had taken her walking the other way. Francis looked up once, just once. His face was not wild now. It was small. Ashamed. He did not speak. He did not fight. He did not ask for anything. He kept his eyes down as the officers guided him to the police car. The door opened. He ducked his head and got in. The door shut with a heavy thud. The inspector stepped out holding Joy himself now, the gray blanket pulled back from her face. He had checked her himself in the room, breathing steady, warm, small hands moving. He crossed under the tape and stood in front of Grace. "Your daughter," he said softly. Grace's hands flew to her mouth, then reached for her baby. The inspector set Joy into her arms with the care of a father. Joy's cries shifted at once. She knew this voice. She knew this heartbeat. She quieted, then let out a small, angry squeak, as if to tell her story in one note. Grace sobbed and kissed the top of Joy's head over and over. "My love," she cried. "My love. I'm here." James wrapped both of them in his arms. He closed his eyes and spoke the only words he had. "Thank you, God. Thank you." The inspector gave them a small smile. "We'll take Francis to the station. A doctor will check your girl at the hospital, but she looks strong to me. Come when you can. For now, hold each other." "Thank you," James said, and he meant it with his whole heart. "Thank you," Grace echoed through tears. "You brought my life back to me." The inspector nodded, then turned to his team. The police car with Francis pulled away. He did not look out the window. He sat bent forward, hands clenched, shame like a weight on his shoulders. A month later, the world looked new again. They chose a small garden for the wedding. White chairs curved around a green aisle. The flowers were simple, baby's breath and soft yellow roses, the same color as the nursery wall. Joy wore a tiny dress like a drop of sunlight and slept in Ada's arms until the music started. Grace's dress was plain and beautiful. It moved when she breathed. Her hair was pinned back with a small pearl comb. She held her bouquet like a promise. As she took the first step down the aisle, the past walked with her for a moment. Cold nights, a torn bag, a worn book hugged tight, a voice on a sidewalk asking, "Are you hungry?" Then the present took her hand, the warm desk at work, the rooftop lunches, the park bench, the kiss that felt like home, a tiny cry in a bright room, and a long, terrible morning that had given way to a louder joy. James stood at the end of the path in a dark suit, a white rose on his lapel. His smile could have lit the room without the sun. When she reached him, he took her hand, and she felt the steady beat of his heart in his palm. The officiant spoke simple words about love and choice. There were no long speeches, only the truth said plainly. "James," Grace said, her voice soft but sure, "you saw me when I was at my lowest. You believed in me when I could hardly breathe. I promised to stand by you, to build with you, to raise joy in peace, and to choose you every day." "Grace," James said, eyes bright, "you are my truth. You are my home. I promise to protect you, to listen to you, to fight for our family, and to love you for all my days." They exchanged rings, simple bands that felt like steady hands. "You may kiss your bride," the officiant said, smiling. They kissed. It was soft and full and right. When they turned to face their friends, Joy let out a small sound like a laugh. The whole garden laughed with her. Grace walked back down the aisle with her husband's hand in hers and her daughter close. She felt the road behind her and the road ahead. The line rose up in her heart like a banner. From a homeless beggar with a torn book to a wife, a mother, and a celebrated accountant. As they stepped into the sun, she whispered inside, "I was never a nobody. I was just waiting for the right chance to shine." And now, she had everything: love, family, and a future brighter than she had ever dreamed.